Hi you guys, welcome back to another makeup and true crime video. If you're new here, my name is Zara and I post beauty content and makeup and true crime videos every week. If you enjoy these videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. And make sure to hit the like button so YouTube shows this video to other people. Okay, let's get into today's case. If you guys have not heard about Diane Downs, Elizabeth Diane Fredrickson was born in Phoenix, Arizona to Wes and Willadine Fredrickson on August 7th, 1955. Diane's family was very conservative, and up until the age of 14, Diane actually followed their conservative values. However, when she was 14, she became super rebellious, and she even ended up dropping the Elizabeth from her name and just went as Diane Fredrickson. She graduated from Moon Valley High School in Phoenix in the 70s, where she actually met Steve Downs, who used to be her neighbor, and they had a brief high school romance before they graduated and they were forced to, move their separate ways. Steve went on to join the Navy while Diane attended the Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College, and they actually decided to continue their relationship long distance, and they promised that they would be faithful to each other. But after a year attending that college, Diane was actually asked to leave the school due to promiscuous behavior. She was just sleeping with all the guys. Diane then had to move back in with her parents in Arizona, and Steve actually ended up coming back from the Navy at the same time as well. So him and Diane reconnected back in Arizona. And then on November 13th, 1973, Diane and Steve ended up getting married, and their marriage wasn't a very great one. They fought a lot because Steve was pretty insecure about Diane, cheating on him again. And then after their short-lived marriage in about 1980, Steve and Diane ended up getting divorced. During the time they were together, they had 3 children: Kirsty Ann, born in 1974, Cheryl Lynn, born in 1976, and Stephen Daniel, born in 1979, who they used to call Danny. So 6 months after their first daughter was born, Kirsty, Diane actually left their family to go join the Navy, and Steve was left to take care of their baby Kirsty by himself. But Diane only lasted 3 weeks at the Navy, so then she comes back, they have a second child, their daughter Cheryl. Then Steve decides, okay, you know what? It's enough. I've had enough children. I'm going to have a vasectomy. So he has the procedure that year after Cheryl was born, and they go on about their lives. Then in 1997, Diane gets pregnant again, but Steve had a vasectomy. So was it the work of the Holy Spirit? No. Diane actually cheated again, but she ended up having an abortion, and then her and Steve just stayed together despite all the red flags in that relationship. So in 1978, Steve and Diane, they moved to Mesa, Arizona, and they both actually started working at the same job at a mobile home manufacturing company. And during this time, Diane was just like on a cheating rampage. She had affairs with many of her colleagues, which resulted in the birth of their third child, essentially, Stephen Danny Downs, in 1979. And Danny's father was actually one of Diane's co-workers, and Steve knew this, but he just accepted Danny as his own. He stated that despite the terrible relationship, he stayed with Diane for that long, mainly for the children. Diane stated that after her abortion, she actually could not cope with the fact of what she had done to one of her own babies. And she said that she was made to believe that a 6-week-old fetus was just a cluster of cells. But after she went to a local fair and she saw an anti-abortion booth and she saw, all the pictures of all the fetuses, she could not cope with what she had done, and she thought the only way to fix this was to have another baby. And Steve had already had a vasectomy, so where else can she get another baby but one of her co-workers? So she ended up having an affair with one of her co-workers, Mark Sager, and he fathered her third child, Danny Downs. So at this point, Steve and Diane's relationship could just not handle all the drama, so they ended up getting divorced in 1980. And actually following the divorce, Diane actually had a ton of affairs, but she kept trying to reconcile with Steve. So then at this stage, as a single mother, Diane had no source of income. So she was like, what am I good at? Getting pregnant. So she decided to become a surrogate mother, but she actually failed 2 of the qualifying psychiatric exams, which, determine your mental state at the time that you would be carrying a baby for someone else. The test reports suggested that she was very intelligent, but she was also psychotic. But then in 1981, Diane started working for the US Postal Service, and in order to do this job, she needed help with her kids. So her kids began taking turns living in separate homes throughout the week. So they stayed with her parents, they stayed with their dad, Steve, and they even stayed with Danny's father, Mark Sager, which is just so random. And all three families would take turns taking all three children, in rotation, taking care of them. When the children were staying with Diane, the neighbors would report that the children were not being taken care of properly. She was accused of leaving her children at home while she went around with men and traveled. And Kirsty, her eldest child, was often left alone to take care of the other two children. Neighbors said they were badly dressed, they were underfed, and friends, acquaintances, neighbors, even Kirsty would say that Diane was an unfit parent who put everything before her children and was especially cruel to her second daughter, Cheryl, who at one point had told neighbors that she was afraid of her own mother. Towards the end of that year, Diane actually got an offer for surrogacy and was paid $10,000. After this, she was like, oh my God, I should open up a baby making business. So she actually tried to launch a surrogacy clinic of her own, but the venture failed before it even began. And then on May 8th, 1982, she gave birth to her surrogate daughter. Around the same time, Diane also began this super passionate affair with one of her co-workers who was named Robert Knickerbocker, and they used to call him Nick. And they met at the post office where they both worked. Oh, and I should have said he was her married co-worker, but their relationship did not last because Robert said that Diane constantly nagged him about leaving his wife, and the fact that she had 3 kids and so much drama, like he just wasn't into it. It just suffocated him, so he decided to end the relationship. So now it's 1983, Diane is only 27 years old, and she decides to move to Oregon. But she just couldn't get over her relationship with Nick, and she actually ended up becoming obsessed with him. She would write him letters in her diary and would visit him too, but he was so adamant he was done with this relationship. He told her he wanted no part in playing daddy to her children. Some of the letters she wrote in her diary, they went as follows. On April 21st, 1983, I still think of you as my best friend and lover, and you keep telling me to go away and find someone else. April 29th, it doesn't matter what Charlene says. I'm a little sad that she has convinced you that the kids would be a burden, because I know it would not be true. May 11th, 1983, I have 3 beautiful children that I love more than anyone else. I think I love them even more than you now. Danny says he's my best buddy, and I'm his best buddy. He always gives me kisses and hugs. Every morning when I go to work, he waves and says, bye mommy, pick me up after work. I love you. Oh, and Charlene was Nick's wife. Do people really write stuff like this in their diaries? I remember I tried to have a diary once, and then all I ended up writing in there was like Eminem song lyrics. So then it is believed that Diane actually began to resent her children because she stated that although she had been with several men, Nick was someone that she really truly connected with. Nick did not want children, and Diane believed that the only reason that he ended the relationship with Diane was because the kids were too much of a burden, not the fact that Diane is a crazy person. So on the night of May 19th, 1983, the staff at the Mackenzie Willamette Hospital in Oregon, they were just settling in for a quiet night when a car comes racing through the drop-off zone at the emergency department. It was Diane, and she ran in with a towel wrapped around her bloody arm, and she screamed, "Help, somebody killed my children." The interior of her car was splattered with blood, and her 3 children, Kirsty, Cheryl, and Danny, were in the back seat of her car covered in blood, and they had been shot at point blank range. All 3 of the children had chest wounds. Cheryl was dying, and the other 2 were critically injured. Danny was paralyzed from the waist down, and he had a bullet lodged in his spine. And Kirsty had suffered a massive stroke from the 2 gunshot wounds in her chest. The nurses then declared Cheryl dead on arrival, and they placed the other 2 children in the ICU. And as the surgeons were struggling to save the children's lives, Diane sipped tea while her single bullet wound in her arm was being treated. The nurses at that point believed that Diane was just numb with shock of what happened to her 3 kids. The nurses stated that they had told Diane, the doctors are doing their best. I'm sure you'll be able to see the children soon. And Diane just laughed and said, only the best for my children. At least I have good insurance. There were no tears, no disbelief, no agony over what happened to her children. When her arm was being x-rayed, Diane was joking about how the police would see her without any makeup on. And she complained about how her wound would always have a scar and she wouldn't be able to tie her shoes until her arm was healed. The staff at the hospital couldn't believe it. It was almost like none of this even happened to Diane. She was just in a great mood. So then the police questioned Diane as to what happened on that night. And this is what Diane states happened. She said they had just been to a friend's house and they were on their way back home. And around 9:30 p.m., she saw an unfamiliar back road. So she decided to take that route home, the scenic route home, because she wanted to go sightseeing at 9:30 at night. She said the children had fallen asleep in the car and Duran Duran's Hungry Like the Wolf song was playing on the radio. And as she was driving, Diane then noticed a bushy-haired man standing on the side of the road and he was waving for her to pull the car over. So she said she pulls over and she turns the car off and she takes the keys out of the ignition. She said the man tells her, I want your car. And she says, you gotta be kidding me. And then the man shoves her to the side, pointed a gun at the car and began shooting at her children. So she says she pretends to throw the keys off into the bushes, and when the man looks away, she pushes him to the side, gets back in the car, and then drives like a maniac to the hospital. It was during this scuffle that she says that the man shot her in the arm. So the police began doing their job and they began looking for this bushy-haired man who Diane ends up giving a sketch of. But to the officers, her story just didn't seem right. Who goes sightseeing in the middle of the night, in the dark, with children in the car? And why would someone pull over for a bushy-haired looking man, just a stranger, while you have kids in the car? It just didn't make any sense. And then other red flags began popping up, like Diane's wound on her arm when she arrived to the hospital was perfectly bandaged up, but her right arm was super clean. Considering the amount of blood she had inside the car, it's nothing got on her. And then the police were also struck by how flat emotionally she was when she arrived at the hospital. She had no feeling showing. She seemed to have no concern for her kids, and she was not upset at all about the fact that one of her children was dead and the other 2 were seriously injured. One had a stroke and one was paralyzed. Rather than focusing on the condition of her children, she was more interested in calling Nick and letting him know what had happened. But she didn't even call the children's fathers to let them know what had happened to their kids. When the staff told Diane that Danny was paralyzed, Diane had stated that she was surprised that the bullet had hit Danny's spine instead of his heart because, he had a chest wound. And then when they told her that Cheryl was dead, Diane was just like, okay. She just accepted it right away without any shock, without any emotion, any distress. It was just like someone told her, oh yeah, no pepperoni pizzas available. We just have some margarita. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. I'll just take the margarita. Her reaction was like that. She also said other things that made her seem super detached, oh boy, this has really ruined my vacation. Hasn't it, Diane? Hasn't it really? And she was also concerned about the fact that there was blood all over her car and it really ruined her new car. So at this point, the public was super scared of this bushy-haired man who was out here killing children, and they felt super sorry for Diane and what had happened to her family. While the police were searching for this bushy-haired man, they ended up searching the crime scene, but they only found the bullet casings. And the gun that was used was determined to be a .22 caliber gun. And then shortly after, the public support for Diane started wavering because Diane ended up doing a bunch of interviews after this happened. During these interviews, she just seemed really off, and it wasn't like a normal mother's response to what had happened to her. So 4 days after Diane's children were shot, the police bring Diane in to reenact what had happened that night. And they also ended up filming this reenactment. And while the cameras were still rolling, Diane, she first primed her hair and makeup in the rearview mirror, and she was smiling and laughing and just really playing it up for the cameras. At one point, she bumps her cast onto the steering wheel and she exclaims, "Oh, this is worse than..." And then she catches herself. And the police believe that what she was about to say in that moment was, "This is worse than when I shot myself."
Sitting in the car is Elizabeth Diane Downs.
I'm throwing the keys, okay? I'm throwing the keys. I go like that. I got in the car, jumped in, put the keys in. I just hit my cast. Started the car and left. The car door shut itself. God, this is worse than, okay.
She is so creepy. Like, as a mother myself, I just find it so weird. Like, how do you laugh and joke like this? I don't understand it. Diane also seemed to be like loving all the attention she was getting from this happening to her. She did a ton of interviews and she seemed to be super interested in talking about her life and how this happened to her. And she also talked herself up a lot in these interviews, like how she was so amazing, how she didn't let this man win because she fought for her children, you know? Like, no, you didn't.
How did this man know your children were in the car? Because if the children were sleeping and lying down in the back of the car, it's dark on the road, how would he know to reach into the car and shoot 3 children separately?
Oprah, I can only give you my conclusion as to what I think might have happened because I don't know. I didn't take the time to ask him how or why. But when he got inside the car, there was a light on inside the car. He could have easily seen the children. If you want an opinion, in my opinion,
Yeah.
It is possible. There were witnesses that saw him out there on the road that night, about 30 people that saw him, and all agreed that he looked like he was drugged in some way.
So during the investigation, the police end up going to search Diane's home, and they end up finding these letters that I read to you earlier to Nick, as well as a .22 caliber cartridge in a rifle that she had in her home. Diane lied to the police about owning a .22 caliber gun, but Nick later on testified that he had actually seen a .22 caliber gun in the trunk of her car. Her eldest daughter, Kirsty, was still in hospital at this time, and she had suffered a stroke, so she was really like unable to speak. But the nurses state that every time Diane went to visit Kirsty, that her vital signs would spike, and the nurses believed that Kirsty was showing signs of intense fear of her mother. And what makes it worse is that Diane had actually told the nurses to pull the plug on Kirsty because she knew that Kirsty was brain dead. But the hospital staff was like, no, you crazy bitch. Like, what the heck? There was zero evidence that Kirsty was brain dead and they refused to pull the plug. So forensic testing began and they had determined that Diane's story just did not match the forensic evidence. There was no blood on the driver's side of the car, nor was there any gunpowder residue on the driver door panel because if the bushy head man had, reached in and shot the kids, there should have been some residue. Nick also reported that Diane had stalked him and she seemed willing to kill his wife Charlene if it meant that, they would be together. Nick stated that he was relieved when Diane left town because that meant that he could reconcile with his wife and, after cheating on her. Police also took into account that Diane had lied about owning a .22 caliber gun when both Steve and Nick had stated they had seen her with one. Investigators later determined that Diane had bought the gun in Arizona, but they had never been able to find the murder weapon. But they found unfired casings in her home with these markings on it that matched the bullets that were fired into the children. One of the worst pieces of evidence, I believe, in this case is that on the night the shootings took place, witnesses state they saw Diane's car driving to the hospital very slowly, only at like 5 to 7 miles per hour, which completely, contradicts Diane's claim that she was rushing to the hospital. So based on this and additional evidence, Diane was arrested 9 months after the shooting on 28 February 1984 and charged with the murder of her daughter Cheryl and 2 counts each of attempted murder and criminal assault for Kirsty and Danny. So her trial begins in May 1984 and, Diane being Diane, thirsty for attention, shows up to the court in a state that shocks the nation. Diane is pregnant again. This is probably like her 5th pregnancy at this point.
Finally, police arrested Diane, and incredibly, she was pregnant once again. Throughout the trial, the public would see Diane being led to the courthouse in a maternity gown and handcuffs.
So Diane confesses to a reporter that she seduced a man and got pregnant before she got arrested because she missed Kirsty and Cheryl and Danny so much, and that, she can't replace children, but she can replace the effect that they give her. And she also goes on to state that children are so easy to conceive. During the trial, the prosecution, they lay out their evidence, but it was actually Diane's own stupidity that showed how unremorseful she really was. At one point during the trial, the song Hungry Like the Wolf starts playing, you know, the song that was playing in the car the night her children were shot. And, you know, Diane's reaction was to bop her head and tap her feet to the beat of the song. Actually, the worst piece of evidence was that her surviving daughter, Kirsty, actually regained her ability to speak and described how on the night the incident took place, her mother was driving the car, she pulls over, she shoots Kirsty, she shoots Cheryl, and she shoots Danny, and then her mother shoots herself in the arm. Kirsty was 9 years old at the time the trial took place, and it had taken months of physical and mental therapy for, you know, her to get up there and take the stand and give her testimony, which was based on a single question. The prosecution asks Kirsty, "Who shot you?" And her answer was so simple too, but very devastating, because her response was just, "My mom." The prosecutors put forth that Diane shot her kids because she wanted to be free. She wanted to have this relationship with Nick, who had told her multiple times that, you know, children were not in his plan, they were a burden, and they were just not something he was willing to compromise on. In June 1984, which is like only a month, Diane was found guilty on all 3 counts and sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years at the Oregon Women's Correctional Center. And during this time, Diane actually gave birth to a baby girl again, who she named Amy Elizabeth. And the baby was then taken by the state and adopted by another family. And Diane's surviving 2 children, Kirsty and Danny, were actually adopted by Fred Hughey, which was the prosecutor in the case. While Diane was in prison, psychiatrists actually diagnosed her with narcissistic and antisocial personality disorders, but it doesn't end there. On July 11th, 1987, only 3 years into her sentence, Diane climbed the fence at the prison and escaped when the guards weren't looking. She made her way to a house that was only 4 blocks away, where she met Wayne Cypher, which was actually a cellmate's ex-husband. And you know what? They began a sexual relationship, and they lived together for like 10 days. And this guy, Wayne, says he fell in love with Diane in 10 days. On the 10th day of their romance, the police found Diane, and she actually received an additional 5 years on top of her sentence, which wouldn't really make a difference for her anyway. So Diane is still in prison to this day, and she still says she's innocent. So that is the case of Diane Downs. I find this case so interesting. Like, I've watched all of her interviews, and there's something about her eyes that just creeps me out. I'm so happy that her 2 surviving children ended up living a normal, happy life. And, you know, her last daughter that she ended up having in prison is also somewhat, you know, happy. She's also done a ton of interviews, which I would highly recommend you check out. They're very interesting. And she looks so much like Diane. So let me know your thoughts on this case below. I hope you guys found it as interesting as I did. Thanks for watching, guys. And if you want to check out some of my other videos, click over here. And make sure to subscribe, guys, and I will see you in my next one. Besitos. Mwah. Bye.